Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Georgia Allen, and I'm the Projects and Relationships Manager at the International Seafarers Welfare and Assistance Network, or ISWAN, as we are more easily and commonly known. We're an international NGO working to improve the lives of seafarers and their families worldwide. And we've been invited by IMPA to give a short update on our current activities. If you've got any questions about anything that you hear about and you want to know more, then please do come up to me after the panel, or you can email me. My address is currently on the screen. So ISWAN do a lot of things related to seafarer welfare, but our core direct welfare services are our helplines, Seafarer Help and Yacht Crew Help. They're both free, confidential, multilingual, multi-channel, international helplines available to seafarers and their families 24/7, 365 days a year. Last year, we provided support to almost 14,000 seafarers and their families across the two helplines. That was a total of 12,000 calls and messages to our helpline colleagues. The top nationalities of seafarer that we assisted were from the Philippines, India, and Ukraine. On Seafarer Help, which is primarily used by seafarers from the shipping industry, and then over on Yacht Crew Help, those nationalities were from the UK, South Africa, and India. There was a real crossover between the issues that we were presented with, but the prevalence was different depending on the helpline. But we would hear about problems with things like contractual agreements, struggle finding employment, mental health concerns, financial and debt problems, and abuse, bullying, harassment, discrimination, and violence, including sexual violence. Importantly, ISWAN is a membership organisation. To date, we have 114 members from across the sector. Our membership is incredibly broad and diverse. There's a few examples here on the screen. We've got shipping companies, insurers, academic institutions, policymakers, unions, faith-based welfare organizations. The list goes on. What unites them and brings them together is a shared understanding of the importance of seafarer welfare, a shared mission to improve that and improve the sustainability of the sector moving forwards. One of the unique things that ISWAN can contribute is our data and our insights. Although the primary purpose of our helplines is always to provide support to seafarers and their families, we do, as a byproduct, collect a really tremendous amount of data about the challenges that they tell us they are facing. And we can then go out to the sector and let them know what it is that we're seeing, what we're being told are the real key issues that are being faced, and we can come together to try and do something about that. Our mission for the coming next few years is to provide more accurate and detailed insights into the key areas of seafarer welfare, to make better use of our helpline data to inform our projects and our services. That's my job as a project manager, is to take those insights, the voices of seafarers themselves, and then to work that into the development of our projects so that everything is seafarer-centered. And then to make key trends more readily available to the sector. And in due course, one of the things that we're going to be offering to our members is top-level live data dashboard that gives them access to insights that is only for those. So talk about our insights informing the development of our projects. One such project is the Social Interaction Matters, or SIM project, as we call it for short. This is researching the relationship between social interaction and seafarer health, safety, and well-being, looking particularly at some key influences on that, such as fatigue, leadership, access to connectivity, and the frequency of port calls. We receive a lot of calls, as I'm sure you can imagine, from seafarers who experience isolation, loneliness, homesickness, depression, and a lack of connection with their peers whilst living and working on board. This can be due to all sorts of things like different cultures, different nationalities, different identities, being a woman, being part of a marginalized demographic. But ISWAN felt that it was important to look more closely at this issue, to try and find more out about it, to find try and find out more about this living side of working at sea, which is underrepresented, excuse me, is an underrepresented part of seafarer welfare. The project launched back in 2020 with 10 different shipping companies. We followed the crew of 21 of their vessels over several months, and we published a report in 2022. The research is now relaunched with new funding and has been broadened to become more inclusive of the cruise and super yacht industries as well. And early next year, we're going to be publishing a refreshed report, refreshed guidance and recommendations about what it is we have learned. We've introduced some new technology partnerships with Sci-Fi, Fitbit wearables, and Fitterbase, and we're really excited about what we're going to learn using these more insightful data collection tools. Another hot topic in seafarer welfare, in maritime in general, is decarbonisation. ISWAN recognised this, and we were receiving a lot of calls from seafarers who were worried about this. And so we decided that we wanted to learn more, coming at it from a different perspective of how is this affecting the seafarer themselves. So this project grew out of insights from seafarers that the rapid push to decarbonise is having a negative impact on their well-being and their job satisfaction. We felt that this was not being taken into account in change management where you're planning for zero carbon. So we carried out a survey and found that the demands of rapid technological change and additional regulatory requirements are negatively impacting substantial numbers of seafarers, particularly engineers, from a point of view of stress, workload, fatigue, and fear of criminalisation. The report also contains seafarers' solutions about how to mitigate the risks and recommendations for the maritime sector. In the new year, we're going to be publishing guidance for both seafarers and maritime stakeholders with practical measures to respond to the challenges of techno-stress and support the well-being of those working in the maritime sector as the pace of decarbonisation accelerates. And there's a QR code there if you want to access this report. Another live project is all about the personal safety and inclusivity of seafarers. The Safe and Inclusive Future for All Seafarers project, or SAFER project, is all about recognising the importance of seafarer personal safety for the broader safety of the industry. Safety in maritime is often only looked at from a physical standpoint, so about enclosed spaces or fire hazards and whatnot, but ISWAN recognises that unless seafarers feel safe, that their perception is that they are safe, then the onboard environment cannot actually be truly safe for all. Earlier this year, we launched a campaign called Safe at Sea, It Takes All of Us, which is all about fostering a culture of allyship on board. The first phase was all focused in on women's personal safety and the contributions that men seafarers can make in making them feel included and valued. But in the long term, we're going to broaden this out to be relevant to and useful for all those who feel marginalized when living at sea. Demographics like those who identify as LGBT, those who are in minority races. We produced some guidance for seafarers and for maritime stakeholders about how to encourage such environments on board. And there's another QR code there if you would like to have a look at this. So the last activity that I want to tell you about quickly are our Seafarers Education and Awareness Sessions, or SEAS for short, and our Family Outreach Programme, or FOP. The SEAS presentations are delivered to seafarers usually as part of the pre-departure orientation seminars. They aim to leave seafarers feeling aware and informed about some of the challenges that they may face at sea and the support that is available to them, as well as self-care and coping mechanisms. The Family Outreach Programme, its objective is to highlight the importance of family support in enhancing the well-being of seafarers, acknowledging its vital role as a lifeline for those enduring prolonged separations from family and home. We receive a lot of calls from seafarers who are having relationship problems with those back at home who don't quite understand what it is that they are dealing with when being at sea for such prolonged periods of time. So through this outreach program, we're aiming to provide support and guidance to families by empowering them with information and resources that will help them to support the seafarer, understand the complexities of the seafaring profession, and facilitate effective communication between them and the seafarer on board. Ultimately, we're hoping that this will help to improve relationship issues between seafarers and their families and friends, and a reduction in calls to us about these challenges. So just quickly to say, if you want to get in touch with me, my email address is on the screen. There's another QR code which takes you to the ISWAN homepage if you want to have a look at what we're all about. And just looking towards the future, what we're working on over the next few years with our 2025 to 28 strategy, which will be published soon, is securing more sustainable funding routes and partnerships so we have less of a reliance on grant funding. Increased international reach. We want to make sure that seafarers in every country, in every region, know about our services and are using them. We want to grow our membership and our helplines. Something I forgot to mention before is we do also run 20 commissioned helplines for shipping companies and other maritime stakeholders. We want to use our data and our insights to inform the sector more frequently and more usefully, and take an overall more holistic approach to health, personal safety and well-being as an important subject. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for those who've joined us. It's good to see a couple of people still in here. So I'm Christopher Saunders. I'm the Chief Maritime Officer at Rightship. So we're the world's largest third-party vetting organization. So we work with charterers and ship owners and managers in terms of recommending vessels, highlighting potential risks with vessels that are being nominated, and also a large part of our work is advocating for improved standards, whether that is in safety, sustainability, or also in the crew welfare side. It's not the easiest to see on that screen, but I'll try my best. Essentially, what I was sort of recapping on here is some of the initiatives we've had in terms of the crew welfare side of things. So in 2021, we released a crew welfare self-assessment. This was really designed for owners and managers as a best practice template of what good looks like in terms of caring for the crew welfare being initiatives. So a lot of the things Georgia highlighted is in there. This is really about going above the MLC and looking at areas where improvements can be made. That can be from internet connectivity on board to mental health support to recreation facilities, catering, grievance systems. So a really positive initiative, and if you could read the numbers, we've had over, I think, 760 companies who've submitted to that, and that's around 13,500 vessels since it's been up and running. So really, really impressive sort of uptake and a lot of really positive feedback in terms of how it's helped owners and managers in terms of focusing on initiatives that could help better provide for their crew. Linked to that, we took on board a lot of feedback from the market in terms of those who had been using the self-assessment tool, and then introduced a revision in May this year, which added sort of more guidance notes around what we were looking for in specific areas, what sort of initiatives we'd seen, and also clarified some of the areas where we'd had direct feedback, as I say. So that's the self-assessment tool. The other initiatives or areas where we sort of touch on crew welfare, we also physically inspect vessels as part of our vetting and due diligence process. So we do about 3,000 vessels a year at the moment. That's going to be increasing over the next couple of years, up to around, we think, sort of 5,000 vessels with some of the changes we've been making. And there's a big focus not just on safety and maintenance and condition of the vessel, but also on the crew, speaking with the crew, understanding how the conditions are on board the vessel, confirming whether those sort of grievance policies are in place, what sort of additional support there is, not just, as I say, on that regulatory MLC areas, but also in terms of best practice and recognizing and rewarding operators who are investing in that. And that brings me on to the crew welfare, the Voice of the Crew survey. So what we looked at is that we had a couple of initiatives out there in terms of campaigning and advocating for improvements in crew well-being, but we hadn't actually heard from the crew themselves. Recognizing there's, of course, the Seafarers Happiness Index, which we're a big supporter of and find, is a really great initiative. But we were keen to kind of give the crew that most closely interface with us at Rightship in terms of the vessels we inspect, the vessels we vet, and to hear from them. So we rolled that out earlier in the year, and we've got the results from some of that to share, which can then lead us through into our panel discussion. So I think I've overlaid on here the dotted lines. This is the Seafarer Happiness Index, the latest results, just for a reference. We didn't have an exact carbon copy in terms of the questions we're often, but what I've done is sort of where there was some similarities, tried to map those. I think the interesting call out and biggest ones on there is really the internet connectivity and the shore leave, and we'll go a little bit deeper on those in the next slide. But overall, I think mirrors the Seafarers Happiness Index in that the results are surprisingly high. I often think in terms of the sentiment from the crew, and across particularly in the general feedback. I think that talks to the resilience that crew do have. But when you start to look through some of the more detailed elements in the data and some of the sort of free text comments that come through, there's some interesting narratives. So as I say, we'll have a look at some of the more detailed ones. Okay, so internet connectivity, one of the lowest scoring, and I think that mirrors in terms of what we see from the Seafarers Happiness Index. What's positive to see, and again, as I say, this was more of a subset of vessels that we do interface with, but high percentage of vessels do have internet on board. I think Starlink has been excellent in terms of that. But what we do notice is that the reliability, the availability of it, it comes through quite consistently as a challenge. The more you have access to the internet, the more there's a desire for it to always be online. And I think also interestingly around usage limits. A lot of responses there in terms of limits on how much bandwidth or how much capacity there is, and potentially in some cases having to purchase additional capacity, and it runs out very, very quickly. So that was sort of one area of feedback linked to the internet. If we look at shore leave, again, one of the lowest scoring items, I think there's clearly a couple of different streams coming through. There's still ports and locations, and as well as companies that don't allow shore leave, and I'm sure that's something that we can touch on in the panel discussion in a moment. But I think what's also interesting is the feedback in terms of some of the results where crew do have access to shore leave and choose not to take it, and that talks to that workload, the stresses and pressures they're under, preferring not to go ashore, but actually to take extra time to rest up because of a grueling sort of workload within the port itself and the quick turnaround times. So it kind of highlights it, that some of the ports are doing fantastic jobs in terms of allowing shore leave, but it's still not the complete picture. There's a lot more at play here before we actually get crew getting ashore and having that downtime that they crave. So linked to that, we've got the work and rest hours. So I was surprised this one scored quite as high, given Georgia touched on some of the challenges with new technology, decarbonisation efforts, and the pressures, the additional workloads. And again, quite a high percentage reporting that they have breaches in their work and rest hours. So there's regulations in place around how much rest you must have in a particular time period. And what was worrying was the statistics at the bottom of the slide there around how frequently those breaches were happening, and particularly ones where the frequency of how many breaches in a month was actually particularly high. Now, some of this is again kind of talks, I think, to some of the items highlighted on the shore leave in terms of workloads, pressures in ports, quick turnaround times, trading routes. On the positive side, I think, to see that 62% of crew are given compensatory rest, that's positive, but really that should be 100%. Under the hours of rest regulations, if there are breaches, that they should be corrected in terms of giving compensatory rest afterwards. So clearly still lots of work to be done in that area. Then the final one I've got is really just touching on living conditions. Again, it scored quite highly, higher than I was perhaps expecting. I think, again, I'm sure items that we'll discuss in the panel, the physical sort of setup on board the vessels, the availability of recreational spaces, the makeup of cabins, all the way from whether it's coming out of the yards or going through refurbishments. There's more that can be done. I thought interesting that almost 50% of the respondents felt that sort of basic amenities weren't there. And what they meant by that, when we looked through the comments, this was items that often came up was around laundry, as an example, the whole entire crew having to share 1 or 2 washing machines that, again, it might seem quite trivial when you think about it, but trace that back to those hours of rest. You're doing your laundry in your rest hours. If there's a competition to get there, you're not resting. You're back and forth to the laundry, waiting for when there's a slot so that you can get something as simple as getting some clean clothes done to get you through the next week. So yeah, I think some really interesting insights in there. There's mountains of data to unpack. This is just obviously a subset of that I wanted to share today in terms of some of the kind of key areas. I think there's lots of positives in there. There's a lot of really great initiatives from some of the organizations we'll have on the panel today. Some really forward-looking organizations as well, shipping companies that are investing in initiatives for their crew, making modifications to their vessels, going above and beyond, and really recognizing that looking after their crew, having a happy crew, is a crew that's going to operate the vessel more safely, more efficiently, and ultimately, that's what all operators should be looking for. So, yeah, I'll leave it at that and take us through to the panel discussion. But thank you.
All right, half the audience is on stage. So, all right, amazing. So we're going to jump straight into, sorry, Paul, I'm going to close this as well, just because it's going to distract me otherwise. We're going to jump straight into a bit of a debate around crew welfare. And after sort of hearing those results, what I'm going to first do is actually ask the panel to introduce themselves, just if you do it really quickly, because otherwise we'll be here for about a week. So if you guys, I think we'll start with Arjay. There is a microphone on the table. I'm sorry, you all have to share. I would give you mine, but no.
Somiyeh, it's okay. I'm good with this. Thank you. My name is Arjay Ravindran. I'm from MCTC. We have the honor to serve over 1,200 vessels, and very happy to be here with, especially with ISWAN, Mental Health Support Solutions, whom we work very closely with. So thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Soon Kok. I'm the port chaplain of the Mission to Seafarers Singapore. A little bit about the Mission to Seafarers. We are a Christian charity organization looking after the physical, spiritual, and mental well-being of seafarers since 1856. In a Singapore context, we will be celebrating our 100th anniversary in a couple of years. So we look forward to learning from all the other panels as well.
Hi, I'm Harmita Singh from BLU Maritime Consultancy. We look into crew wellness and well-being. core being catering and provision supply, but all through wellness and well-being, because one refers to the physical aspect, the eating side, and it's directly related to the well-being side of things. So they're very interrelated. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stella Kiss. I'm a clinical psychologist and general manager of MHSS, Mental Health Support Solutions. We are basically a big group, all scattered around the world, of clinical psychologists, and we speak over, I think, 50 different languages in order to ensure that everyone feels comfortable talking about their problems.
My name is Mikael Weis. I'm the CEO of Source to Sea, and we actually focus on building solutions which make it very easy for the crew to order the right food and get delivered the right food. And besides that, I have a master mariner background and spent a few years at sea, so that's probably why I sit here today.
Amazing. I was going to say, I don't think we need to hear from you guys at this end. So I'm just sort of going to kick straight off with some of obviously the challenges that have come out from sort of what we just saw in regards to people's, or the challenges that people face in regards to work rest hours. I think those are one of the sort of most popular things that are a challenge on board, and I think the other one is about shore leave and about how seafarers are getting onshore and B are able to actually have leave. So I think I'd like to go for the mission first, because I know you guys do a lot of work on the ground in regards to, especially in this region, and I just want to sort of hear your views of what you are finding is the most prevalent sort of thing for shore leave.
Well, as far as Singapore is concerned, shore leave is approved by the authority. But having said that, we still did not see as much shore leave due to various reasons. You know, when we walk on the ground, when we visit seafarers on board the ships, they often tell us, you know, in their own words, you know, I hate to come to Singapore. Why? You know, because, you know, all the actions will take place in Singapore. Crew change, efficient cargo operations, which sometimes I say in jest, you know, Singapore, we are victim of our own success. You know, allow me to blow a little bit of our own trumpet. Yeah, so you see, we are victim of our own cargo operations are efficient, handling of you know, crew change, provisions, everything is so efficient. So ships come alongside for a very short period. That leads to shore leave not being available. You know, to a Singaporean seafarers, they could be living within a 5-kilometer radius from the port, but they cannot go home. You know, that really set them back for quite a bit. You know, so. What we have done in Singapore, Mission to Seafarers, to alleviate this issue, we have provided free transportation within the ports. You know, this is just so that you know, shore leave can be made a little bit more available, not just within the ports, container ports in PSA, but in Jurong Port as well. In the piers that you know, seafarers that come in from the anchorages can also go to town and enjoy their shore leave to make it a little bit more feasible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just want to go off the back of that to Stella, because I mean, from a psychology perspective, you obviously hear a lot of what effect that might have on a seafarer if they're not getting that shore leave and they're not able to go home. So from sort of your perspective, or the things that you've learned from sort of doing your job, how do you find, does it really have a bad effect on the people? If some people are even not wanting to take that leave, like, you know, we saw 40% of them opt to not go ashore. So how do you think it sort of, or what do you see are the common trends that affect people because of that?
I think it really depends, but oftentimes frustration is a big part of it as well, that they don't get the opportunity to leave the vessel. And on the other hand, the seafarers I talk to, oftentimes they're just incredibly tired and all of this takes extra effort and going outside, filling out paperwork and whatever. It's a much longer process than just walking off the vessel and coming back on. So a lot of them always, or like the ones I talk to at least, I can't speak for everyone, they say they prefer to maybe download something if they're in the port and watch something in the cabin and wind down that way.
Sure. And Christopher, from a vessel owner or a vetting perspective, what can almost shipping companies do to change or streamline the process of going ashore? What do the seafarers say from that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, there's a couple of different angles to it. I think maybe touching on what you mentioned around not wanting to go in terms of the hassle of going out. I think I was at sea myself for quite a number of years, and I've experienced it absolutely. I think some of it could be tackled in terms of the manning levels on board the vessels, because the simple fact is, if you choose to go ashore today, you're normally swapping watches with someone else to be able to cover for you. And that means as soon as you come back from shore leave, you're going back onto watch, you're trading off rest to go ashore. So a lot of it boils down then to the working schedules on board the vessel, what sort of watch keeping there is, whether there's senior officers being willing to take a watch to cover and offer up crew the opportunity to go ashore. So I think it's hard for sort of major changes in terms of the processes and in terms of every country is different. I think ship owners can do more in terms of reporting or flagging ports and that are difficult and block it, so that more can be done to kind of champion for change. But I think the biggest thing that really is in their influence is their own crew, how many of them are on board, how they can try and alleviate some of those barriers where people feel they'd prefer not to go. I think that's the most tangible item they could action at this stage.
Sure. And sort of thinking about sort of life on board in general, and I think this sort of goes to the food aspect, because I think food for anybody is key. I mean, regardless of whether, you're at home or away, I think food makes a huge difference as to who or the environment of food on board, the sort of bringing together the social aspect. And I know we got Harmita and we got Arjay, both of which you do the food thing. So I'm like, from your perspective, is the environment on board getting better in that perspective? Are we creating more of an environment where people want to stay on board, or is it just that the barriers or the challenges, as Christopher was saying, to do the swap is actually what the challenge is? Or are we creating more of an inclusive environment on board for everybody that they actually want to stay there? So from you guys, or what you've learned to what you've seen, like, do you think that it is the environment on board, or is it still the challenge of getting off the vessel?
I think food plays a huge role, right? Especially because there are so many cultures on board together at the same time. So there are Filipinos, there are Indians, let's say, example, together on board. And for chief cook, now chief cook is only one nationality. For him to be catering to both the nationalities and making both the nationalities happy is very important, because let's say the crew cook is Filipino. Is he familiar with the cooking styles of the other culture? Because that's very important. Because if it's not, the blame always comes to, oh, the cook is not good, or the food what we're eating is not good. So food has, yes, a huge impact also on your performance, because if you're not happy with the food on board, it directly affects your performance. It is important that you're eating a balanced diet, in the sense, are you eating your right amount of carbohydrates, protein, fiber? And if you're not, then are you optimized? Are you working at your best levels? Because at the end of the day, ship is operated by the crew on board, and if the crew are not, eating well, then there are bound to be possible incidents that can lead to fatalities and thousands and thousands of dollars for ship owners. So, yeah.
And Arjay, from a training perspective, of you sort of being in a situation where you are training or educating chefs and cooks to be more diverse in the food range, do you think that do you think it's changed over the years? Are we
I think
better?
it has changed drastically, drastically. 5 years ago, you would see, you know, the way, because everything has got to do with history, with culture. So, for example, Filipino food, right, is, you know, a lot of it tends to be more fried, right? But now you see a huge difference. In fact, we also see protein consumption that used to be much lower with Asian crew is now higher. We also see more of our crew being more educated and wanting to be more healthy, right? We see this in the perspective where you also have more crew wanting superfoods on board. We have a crew requesting for chia seeds, quinoa. These things didn't exist back then, and now they do. So the conversation has started. A lot of the initiatives that we have done, the pickup rate is much more. We used to do webinars 5 years, 5, 10 years ago, and today the pickup rate is 20 times more than we used to have. So there is more interest. There is a bigger dialogue now. People want to be connected to home, right? And one of the two things that you can be connected to home when you're on board, first of all, it's the internet with Starlink, which is amazing. A lot of our clients now have that installed. Great way, right? The second way on board would be the food, to connect people. And our chief cooks as well on board, when they have that intent to want to bring people together with food, you will see wonderful results. If you have a chief cook that's not very motivated, then you're going to have a subpar experience, and it affects everyone on board, like Ms. Singh said.
Amazing. I mean, at any stage, if anybody's got any questions for the panel, please do feel free. Otherwise, I feel like I'm hogging the mic. So please, if anybody's got any questions to ask anybody, please do feel free to interrupt me or jump in sort of at any time.
But I just, one more thing I'd like to add something to what RJ said. It's very important, you know, the chief cook is very important on board. In the last 10 years, you know, a decade, you see your senior officers ratings, their salaries have increased, but chief cook is one of them. Their salaries are also, you know, have remained the same, and there's not really been a change. So that means there's also lack of incentive for the chief cook. You know, there needs to be a level of motivation there. So.
Sure. And I think we're going to sort of have a look at, or we're going to speak about some sort of training and development and sort of motivating people on board to gain a better sort of mental state and a better well-being. But from a perspective of, I know Christopher yourself has been on board. I know Mikael, you've also been on board. How have you seen it change? Have you seen better development programs that are more centered around individuals? Have you seen sort of programs that are still standardized, that you've just got to fit into the mold that's already there? Or how are we developing as an industry to create a more motivated environment where A, people want to stay, and B, people are happier?
Yeah, it is, as you can tell from my age, a few years ago I've been at sea. But I would say when I was at sea in the late 90s, we had a saying that was that the three most important things on board was breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I think that's actually extremely true, because you don't have, at least at that time, still the case, not so much to look forward to, right? You are working many hours a day. There's the port calls, you're taking out of your routines, but the meals, you center around the meals. So they are extremely important. And then there's another dimension to this, which is really the cost side of it, which I think is something that's, of course, for MCTC, that's something that's worked on every day. You know, how much money is spent per head per day on the meal. And you think about it, you're discussing $1 per head, maybe $2 per head, more or less, for someone who's operating a vessel worth a lot of money, right? So it's really an area where I think that the industry should be challenged. Is that where you want to keep a very tight budget, or should you try to negotiate a little bit better on your boiler suits and then make sure there's enough food and good food?
And from an industry perspective, sort of, we are all, dare I say, old in the industry. We are almost inviting the next generation into the industry, and we are peers, we are representatives of what that looks like. I mean, how can we persuade somebody to go on board when it is $1 or $2 per head? How do we persuade the industry? How do we persuade the regulators to change that? What are we all going to do to sort of do that? And I think, Georgia, from the ISWAN perspective, but from a less political and a more, you know, seafarer-centric perspective, I mean, do you get data where they do want more money spent on them? They do want more individualized situations?
Actually, we hear that people are not only motivated by money, they're motivated by all kinds of different things. We started out talking about shore leave, and then we moved on to talking about food and the importance of that. And, you know, shore leave, it's not available enough. And I mentioned earlier in my presentation about ISWAN's Social Interaction Matters, or SIM project, as we call it for short. What we're trying to do with that project is pull the different strands together. So if you don't have time to go on shore, you don't have the motivation or the energy to do so, but breakfast, lunch and dinner are the most important times of the day and you're definitely not going to miss that, then okay, we'll use that as the opportunity then to socially interact and to see an uptick in your well-being. I think there's a misconception that socially interacting has to be only, you know, in a big group or a party situation or an organized event or something, but actually it can just be sitting with another person and eating your meal and having a conversation. And we really saw the beneficial impacts of that when we were carrying out this research. So the kind of guidance that we're offering as part of the project is, you know, these smaller, more achievable opportunities and ideas around how to come together and see a boost in your well-being that feel manageable within the time and the resources that you have available, rather than saying, you know, oh, well, you can't get out onto shore. Well, that's the only thing that we see as being good for your health. If you can't do that, then, you know, taking the negative approach rather than the positive approach. And I think it's the same with things like money. You know, the newer generation that's coming in, they're not only motivated by that, they have broader demands around their general holistic well-being, and they want to make sure that they're going to have other opportunities to feel connected to what they're doing beyond just salary.
Thanks. Okay, and I think that sort of leads me on to my own personal question about sort of technology and internet, because, you know, I have two small children who have an extension of their arm, which is their phone, and all of their knowledge is probably not in here, it's on here instead. And I want to know from an understanding perspective of the industry, is the technological advancements, is it actually hindering the seafarers? Because you would say that some of their, and we were even discussing this earlier, about their social interactions are not necessarily face-to-face anymore. They are either here or here. And I'm like, does the technology that we are introducing on board, is it a hindrance, or is it, from a personal perspective of all the panel members, from, you know, your own experiences of listening to seafarers, of discussing it with seafarers, of looking at data, I'm like, is it a hindrance, or are we moving into the right direction for the next generation? I mean, we'll start with Christopher, since it's just here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think it's twofold. I think overwhelmingly it's positive, but it does bring in some challenges as well. I think you hear a lot around the always-on sort of elements from a work point of view. You know, captains, crew being bombarded from the shore side for requests because the vessels are so accessible now, being asked to dial into Teams meetings, things like this. In some circumstances, that's probably an absolute game changer in terms of getting a shared understanding of certain items, working through challenging. But in others, it feels completely overbearing, and you don't have a break. I think there's lots of room for technology to be better used to reduce the workload on the crew. I think that's an area. In terms of the more social side, the more there's so many benefits. But as with social media in, you know, in the shore side, you know, it's not without pitfalls as well. You know, if you're going through challenging things at home, sometimes it's fantastic to be connected, and that really helps to alleviate that situation, and you work through it. On other times, you know, I talk from experience. I was at sea at a period where we had no internet, then it started to creep in, and then it kind of became the norm. So I've sort of experienced all of them. And on some occasions, it was fantastic being able to have that. On other occasions, actually, being completely switched off, and you almost were focused a lot on work, and the guys around you was your support network. And you were a little bit sheltered from some of those challenges going on at home. So it's a mixed bag. I think there's some fantastic initiatives, though, where companies are like introducing their own almost social networks and things like that, and I really like that. In that, you know, talking to the food, I've seen initiatives where the cooks are sharing via that sort of internal social media platform that the meal they made on board their vessel, that's then going out to other vessels. It's creating a, you know, a bit of competition between the different vessels. You know, people from the shore are liking the, you know, and it's just creating that kind of, you've got a peer group who understands what you're going through, and it's just creating a really nice environment and support network. So I think there's loads of positives, but you know, as we all know, with social media and access to the internet, there's challenges as well, for sure.
Oh.
Yeah, my voice is a bit husky, so I hope. Yeah, Christopher, you've done a lot on the Rightship already. I think getting on the nutrition side, which is the food regulations and at least the self-assessment tool, TMSA has their part of their share of what they're doing. I was talking about the technology part. I thought on the rest hours, and that's already a rule there. How about take hours and rest hours? That means, you know, you have some limitations on take hours on board, where people are sometimes, like you said, you know, there's no disconnection. You're continuously on the net. And how do you get disconnected? Maybe in the future, you have something called take hours and non-take hours. I don't know what could help, but Rightship Ways or Ship Owners Association, something might look at it. Otherwise, I remember I myself a captain and used to sail earlier, while we were totally disconnected, actually. Right now, you're not disconnected. You're totally involved. You're at home, actually. You're not on board. And imagine it's the plus and the minus. Of course, the minus is what affects. And then talking about suicides and stuff like that, where you are, you know, getting affected by the troubles at home. So take hours and rest hours, something like that. That was my comment. You think that is possible in the future?
Oh, I think it's a really good point. I think what it ultimately highlights for me is a lot of these sort of challenges, it boils down then to quality of leadership, whether that's from the shipping organizations themselves, the example that's set from the shore side, to the senior officers on board the vessel. I think in so much of whether it's safety culture, whether it's crew welfare, crew well-being, strong leadership, empathy, understanding other parties, that is really the biggest mechanism, the biggest tool to set the right example, to you know, not be putting as much pressure, even though the option is there. And it ultimately it comes from the top and then flows down from there. And if an organization isn't setting that example of really caring for the crew, you can put the best internet on board and roll out lots of initiatives and feel that that is making a difference. But if you don't practice what you preach, if you don't really hear from the crew, is a really important part, but also make sure you're not facilitating making the situation worse in terms of the way you're connecting with the vessel from the shore side, the pressures, extra pressures you're putting them under. So I think don't underestimate the importance of leadership and culture development from an organization and the role that plays on board the vessel.
Since I think anybody else want to make a comment on the technology thing? We are going to get to the sort of the cultural side of sort of ship owning and all that kind of stuff. Go on, Stella. You've got the mic already.
Just trying to be polite. Yeah, I think I just wanted to get back onto something that actually you and I talked about earlier, and that is also the differences in the generations. Whereas I think a lot of maybe the older seafarers believe that when you spend a lot of time on your phone, you're not being as social. But for the much younger generation, their time on their phone is their social time in a way, because they're communicating with each other on there, but it might be perceived differently for people who grew up differently. So we were just talking about it, how a lot of seafarers get together to play strategy games on their phones. This is at least what I hear. And they all do this in their own cabins, but they all play together. They play the same game, the same team, but they all do this separately in their cabins. So for them, this is like a social activity, which might be difficult to understand, but that's also something you have to take into consideration when we're looking at the generational gap, I think, on vessels.
Thank you, Stella. I just want to quickly add, I know we talk about it being a bit more personal, but on an operational perspective as well, I do see a lot of benefits to it. It might be a little bit too much communication at some point, but there are a lot of benefits. You know, we talk about very easy consultation that you can quickly do over Teams, right? And from the office point of view, this adds a lot of value. We've been able to do onboard visits, virtually now. We also have recipes and videos which our chief cooks have access to, and also increasing efficiency, right? We usually relied on a telephone or emails. Sometimes it's not always that easy to access. And right now you have our captains who will come and tell us, Arjay, can I just Teams you? You know, we've come to that stage. So it's made things much more faster and easier, and I think you make the world smaller. So even though you're on board, you don't really feel the issues of being on board, which I think is important.
I think investing in technology is important because it's more of an opportunity cost, and if you don't, then you're kind of falling behind, right? You have to move with the generation, and technology is constantly evolving and changing. And if you're not on technology, that means you're falling behind, you're lagging behind. But it also has its downsides, like you mentioned. You know, there is hindrance. That means cybersecurity is an issue, cyber attacks. So you need to also learn to identify them. You also cannot be 100% reliant on the technology front, because let's say if there was no network and your systems were to fail, then what? So then you should not be, kind of completely lost or handicapped. Rather, you should also have the next plan in action.
And I just want to ask, from a mission perspective, how is technology changing the way you guys do your work on the ground?
Well, as far as we are concerned, I hear a mixed view. The pros and cons of technology. On the ground, while we are visiting seafarers on board the ships, very often we conduct a one-to-one counseling with the seafarers. And from the spiritual aspect, allow me to share that very often I have seafarers doing a confession to me. They have so much time, access to the internet, that some of them has spiraled into pornography or gaming, which with technology is good. It's helpful in terms of liaising with companies and others, learning new knowledge and all that. But if it is not managed properly, it may be a tool that you can be abused, which may affect you in a negative way.
Georgia?
On that point, I think the first step then is for the industry, the sector as a whole, to accept that technology is a reality. It's a reality on shore that everyone's addicted to their phones. Why would it be any different on board? Once that's accepted, then we can move forwards into the, okay, so how do we manage this in a more healthy manner? How do we educate seafarers around things like healthy social media use, healthy internet use, those sorts of things? Stop harking back to when, you know, everyone was in the crew mess and having a beer together, and just let's look forward about, okay, this issue is real, how can we address it in a productive and healthy manner? And then the other point that I will just quickly make is, I would argue actually that connectivity is a safety issue on board. We hear from seafarers where the internet is either still so poor or so expensive on their ships that they can't use it. So if their vessel is coming near land at a time when they should be resting, they should be sleeping, but they know that they can pick up signal from shore, they will forfeit their sleep so that they can use their phones, pick up that signal and get in touch with their families. Well, then that's obviously going to lead to poor quality sleep, which is going to lead to fatigue, which is going to lead to mistakes and safety issues. So the provision of high quality, good internet on board is an essential.
And from a wider perspective, I don't know if Christopher, if this is probably the right person to address it to, but do you find there being a sort of mad disparity in regions or in vessel types who have better connectivity or better technological sort of things on board from a Rightship perspective? Do you find when, you know, is there a regional difference in connectivity or all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so it's not something we've got sort of expanses of data on. There was obviously a little bit within the survey you could break down in terms of vessel types and trade patterns. I think in general, it would be fair to summarize, there's a cost obviously involved in putting that equipment on board. That has drastically come down with the likes of Starlink and some of the newer satellite technology. So that's opened it up and made it more accessible. The trading pattern, you know, obviously if the vessel is deep sea, is more remote, they don't have alternatives, they're not coming into port as often, they can't use sort of cheaper alternatives, mobile connectivity, that sort of thing. So they're more likely to need to have it from and I think the key is, and certainly the first reason to have it on board is from a business point of view, from the vessel's day-to-day operations, you know. And some vessels will still just have the internet available for ship's business, for the master, the chief engineer, you know, in terms of daily running of the vessel, and very limited access then, if any access for the crew. So those mature ones though, and you know, mature owners will be investing and seeing it as a key provision. The MLC regulations are you know, sort of going to be mandating that it's a sort of a requirement. It's going to be interesting to see how that pans out and how really what the true picture on the ground ends up looking like. Even though once the technology is on board, there's then limits in terms of keeping it online. So some systems, I think the newer ones are a lot better, but some of the older ones could be quite temperamental, would need someone, you know, on board who kind of could tinker with it, realign up the satellites and things to keep the thing working. I think it's a lot easier now with Starlink. It's quite, you know, take it out of the box and get it up and running pretty quickly. There's also availability in terms of certain geographics where the satellite connectivity and coverage isn't as strong, or there's blocks being put on it by governments and sort of certain countries where they sort of block it and ban it. So it is quite variable in terms of the vessels, how much they've invested, the trading patterns. So yeah, I don't know if anyone really has sort of a whole picture in terms of the data of what that footprint looks like, but it's safe to say it is improving every year.
I mean, that's the end of my questions. So if anybody has any other questions for the panel.
Yeah, hi. Sorry. I'm Captain Aki, and to introduce myself, I'm a cruise handler. So I know that's a new word for everyone here. No one has heard of a cruise handler. So everyone is, you know, everyone here in this whole panel, everyone in the room outside, they are ship handlers, you know. Sorry. So like I say, you know, why I call myself cruise handler, because you saw the response of the ship handlers when we started this topic. Everyone in the room was a ship handler. They disappeared, you know. So that's what happens when crew put their request to a ship chandler, So I've started something in Singapore. I've been running this last 1 year where I'm actually taking care of the crew needs. Mostly the panel is very great. I heard from a vetting point of view, the crew care, uh, the food, psychology, Siemens mission, obviously, and again, food. But we are restricted to mental anxiety and depression. We think that a guy who has mental anxiety or depression, he's sad. But what about other people? There are so many crew on board. There are 22 more members. Maybe one guy is mentally depressed, but there are 22 who are still not happy. That doesn't mean that they are, they don't have to come to same category, right? So what I feel that crew welfare is not limited to anxiety and depression. It's about meeting their actual needs. You know, if I tell you, I was sailing not very long time ago. Okay, don't go by my looks. I sailed like almost 16 years, and 3 years I'm at shore. I've done 5 ships in command. I never saw a single guy during my sailing time who was depressed, and I feel because I made sure everyone's happy. you know so if we go on the other side, if the people are happy, there is no point they will be ever depressed. And who's taking care of that? No one. So if I tell you a crew wants a small pair of socks and he requests the ship chandler or the crew agent, he cannot complain to the company, hey, my socks are torn, can someone get me a pair of socks? No one's going to listen to him. But who's doing that? Nobody. Okay, we tell about internet connectivity. They have internet, they have Starlink, they have access to Amazon, they have access to everything. But you can look, you cannot buy. It is so basic thing.
And what do the panel think, as a general, from a pay perspective, what are the economical implications of that individuality on board, of you being, like the chap says, for you to individually get the seafarer even the smallest thing that they require? I mean, what are the true, I don't know, I'm not a ship owner, I'm not a ship manager, I don't deal with sort of economics of things, but I'm like, what are the actual cost implications of that? And how do we, pay the seafarer less to give them more on board? Do we have to sacrifice something to give them a better environment, like the gentleman says? But does the panel have any opinions?
Thank you for the question. Although, just eliminate the line of reduced salary. It's controversial. But what I would say when we talk about economic implications, it's important to note that I think maybe you would feel the same from a food perspective. When I speak with captains, right, they're very particular these days, especially now. If they order X brand, they want X brand, right? And if you don't give them this, it's not because the supply did not have the availability or whatsoever. The exact words which I've heard is, we are treated as second-class citizens. This is something which maybe you have shared this as well, right?
I tell you, I come across this every time I visit a ship, and the captain asks me a pack of coffee, right? And the only coffee I've seen at sea is Lavazza or Nescafe. You go to Giant, there's a whole section of coffees. Why can't those go to the ship? They afford it, I sell coffees like separate orders to the crew. They say we afford it, we want it, but they request to the ship chandler, and he only says, hey, not in stock or not available, because he has to go extra mile to procure that.
Exactly. And this is something that has also changed. We ensure that our suppliers, they go forth and take the effort to go the extra mile to procure these things. Of course, it's also with the captains and chief cooks' duty to keep it within that budget that they have. But essentially, it is to ensure that your suppliers are able to go that extra mile, right? We don't work with 1,000 chandlers with us. We work with less than 380 suppliers globally without exclusivity, so that we are able to ensure that if we onboard a supplier, they have enough meat in the game to go above and beyond for our crew. When they come and say they want X brand, like you mentioned, they want, if you want Jacob's coffee or some other specific brand, they would go out and buy it locally for you. And I think this is something which can only be done if you prioritize and ensure that, okay, I have a partner that I work with, and they're gonna go that extra mile. If you just go with a ship chandler, right, that you would order once, he's not going to go that extra mile. He's going to give you the stock item that he has. So this is from a provisions perspective, I would say.
And I just want to ask, from a mission perspective, do you find sort of the same sort of? I know a lot of, if we put the spiritual stuff aside and go for the physical, and what they're actually asking for and how their well-being is affected by what they're asking for, do you find that they have a lot of challenges, as the gentleman's pointed out?
Well, allow me to address your question. As far as we are concerned, again, the company may not be obligated to get the brand, the Jacob's coffee that you need. But having said that, you can always reach out to us. We have a very strong team in Singapore. You can order anything legally, and we will try our very best to address it. To a certain extent, we have a lady in our team. We see increasing number of female seafarers on board the ship, and then there are certain things that it's not convenient to ask a guy to buy, and then they can approach our lady ship visitor who can then help to address those issues. So as far as Mission to Seafarers is concerned, those areas are areas that we look into in greater details to help seafarers.
One thing for sure I know, the most number of trips Mission to Seafarers make from the port is to Mustafa, right? Because every seafarer who comes to Singapore, he wants to go to Mustafa for the same reason, what I'm telling you, that they want to buy something which no one is ready to supply to them on ship, right? And if I ask any of you in Singapore, how many times you go to Mustafa, or how many times you want to go to Little India, right? You want to go to Marina Bay Sands, you want to go to someplace else. So this is what I'm saying, that maybe as ship owners, or like the partners, the stakeholders, we have to find a way the things reach them in the same way how we buy at shore. We can buy anything, everything on a click of a button, but it is not for the seafarers. So this is where I started this as helping seafarers when I moved to Singapore last year. Now I quit my whole-time job and I'm working towards this mission. I want the seafarers on board to get everything what they deserve and what they need, and at the same cost, how they get ashore. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, sorry, I wasn't looking.
Sorry. No, just one comment to this, because it's very clear there are some conflicting interests here, right? There's a shipping company, and they want to streamline, they want to consolidate, they want to be sure that the suppliers are only supplying the brands of coffee, as an example, that they have agreed to. So that means that a business you are running is probably gonna be a blossom business here the coming years, because the OPEX is still winning a lot in this game, right? And it has been for many, many years. But we all know that OPEX is also about the crew, a lot about the crew, because if they feel good, they will be productive, they will stay, they will be retained, and all that stuff that we know so well. So I think these interests of conflicts of interest will stay, and I think we will have to work around them.
Do we have any more questions? Oh.
Hi, my name is Wei Shen. I'm from MCTC. So just a bit of comment to add on to this gentleman and what the panel has said. I mean, we have been seeing not just in Asia, but also in the Far East, like in the Chinese and the Taiwan, where crew actively have been purchasing personal products, personal items, like they buy from the Chinese online stores and they ask for delivery to the ships. So with the help of course, us and the ship chandlers. So these things are happening. But of course, it is good for the crew, as in terms of welfare and morals and bring up the things that keeps the seafarers going. But of course, we do have to understand that in the industry there is a lot of regulations and there's a lot of restriction. Of course, we have to take into mind ISPS. If you send a parcel into the ship, you know, a lot of process goes into place. So I think there has to be a balance in most of the things that we do. I mean, of course, we have the mission to help, and of course, we have yourself to do the extra miles for the crew, which is good. So back into what we have heard just now, that on the budget basis, the ship management company has a procedure or SOP to fulfill. So in terms of running a big organization and a shipping corporation, we also need to be in mind that the company, usually most of the company, I believe sincerely, are giving all their best to fulfill. There's a minimum thing that I would say not minimum. I would say most of the company, for example, NYK and those big companies, that actually give a very good budget to the crew. So the captains actually has a free will to get even magnum bars on board the ships. So I think in that aspect, you cannot have, we as I mean, I'm a seafarer myself, we as crew, we cannot have everything under the sun. So we need to be realistic in certain ways. Of course, the perks of having extra things like special coffee, Starbucks coffee is good, definitely good. Right.
Thank you so much. Does anybody else have any questions? No? Am I all right to wrap it up, Paul? I just want to thank the panel. Thank you guys so much. If you guys have got any other comments for the audience, please do let them know now, because I'm going to cut you all off otherwise. But yes, thank you all for staying, because everybody else left. But thank you all. Thank you. Thank you, the panel. Thank you so much.